Rost Martin, yet another entry into the really crowded field of compact polymer frame striker fired pistols. It's hard to be competitive in that field, but Rost Martin, a company out of Dallas, Texas, is going to give it a try. I want to compare that with a few other pistols and look at the features of this gun. I have not yet shot it, just got it, but we'll talk about it and eventually get it out to the range and do a follow-up. All right, thanks for dropping in while we take a look at the Rost Martin RM1c. C, I presume it means for compact. Just picked this up the other day. Have not yet had a chance to get it to the range, but Rost Martin is an interesting company out of Texas. One of the two owners of the company is apparently related to CEO or somebody else up in Springfield Arms, but there's no connection between the two. I read someplace that this gun was a couple of years in the development. I don't know. I got a little problem with that. I want to talk about that later. But first, let's see how it comes. It comes in a nice cardboard box, not a range bag like some of them are coming in nowadays. It has a paper manual. Wow. I know some people are saying you don't need a paper manual because everything's on the internet. Well, no, not everybody is on the internet these days. About 27% of the population of just the United States, and not to mention other countries, do not have access to true high-speed internet. Plus, a lot of people don't like looking stuff up on their phone. So anyway, paper manual, nice touch, and well-done manual, nice color-coded. Interesting that the coloring in the manual, the highlight area, is kind of similar to the color of the follower on the magazines. Speaking of which, you get two. You get a 15-round flush fit and a 17-round extended base magazine. Of course, the gun fits there in the top. A little cutout for an optic. I'm not sure how that'll actually work with an optic on it. I don't think it will. But in the the layer below this, of course, then you get two additional back straps. You get a lock, of course, and you get one optics plate. Now, why just one? Well, this one, by the way, is a metal optics plate. Comes with screws, comes with wrenches to put it on, the whole bit. I'm sure I'll be using that in the near future. But one optics plate because it's the most popular. It's the RMR footprint, which is fitting for a gun of this particular size. It doesn't come with the others. About four or five different base plate or optic plate designs, and those are available for around $25. Man, a metal base plate or optics plate for around $25. Hey, some of the other manufacturers ought to take note. Speaking of which, I also got some extra magazines, and about $25 for a metal magazine. Wow. All right, a lot of value. The gun itself retails for a little more than $4.5. You can pick them up for $400, give or take. But here's where we get back to the year in development. I'm not quite so sure, because the Arex Delta M, by the way, I just picked this up the other day. I did a review on one a while back, but that was a borrowed gun. I found this one in the consignment case in my local gun store, and just the way it sits right now, with an optics plate already on it and a threaded barrel, for a price that was okay. But my point to that is the Arex Delta M medium-sized frame is really not a whole lot. Well, okay, there's some differences, but the Rost Martin, even though it was a couple of years in development, well, in fact, they said one of the hardest things to get in, I read this in another article elsewhere, the trigger required longer development than most parts. Well, why? I'm not quite sure why, because, by the way, we'll start out by showing guns are in fact unloaded. The trigger on this, I mean, nice trigger, and it's about a 4.5 pound fairly consistent pull. Nice thing about it, you can see a striker indicator, which is very similar to the HK VP9 series and the Canik series, that shows the gun is not 100% cocked. But the trigger itself comes out about 4.5 pounds. They say it's going to be right around 5 consistently. And again, on an average of 5 pulls, I get 4.5 pounds. It's almost 3 pounds just to get to the wall, and there's a little bit of grip. But again, it's a brand new gun, has not been fired. I've dry fired it a lot, but I have not fired it. But once you get to that wall, it is short, it's crisp. And for those of you who insist on shooting to the reset, it does have a very tactile, audible reset, and a little bit of movement after that, but not a big deal. The reset, though, does get you right back to the wall. 5 pounds. And you know something? It's not a whole lot different than the feel of the trigger on the Arex Delta. This one is, it's a used gun, so I'm not feeling any grit in it, but once you get to the take-up, you got a nice crisp wall, again, right around 4.5 pounds, and you got a very tactile, audible reset. So are the triggers different? Well, are the guns that much different? There are some different features, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, but first thing, let's look at magazines. They cannot be swapped, only because the base plate on the Arex Delta, you can see that little line right there, that little ridge, is designed to fit in the grip, but the magazine out of the Rost Martin does work in the Arex Delta. And ambidextrous magazine release, of course, you don't have to swap it because the catch on the mag is on the front, not on the sides, so therefore you can in fact reach it from both sides on the Arex as well as on the Rost Martin. But now that I got the magazines out, let's take a look at this. By the way, you do not need to pull the trigger to take the slide off, even though it's kind of similar to a Glock. Pull it back just a hair, pull down on the slide release levers, and comes right off. So let's do the same thing to the Arex Delta. And again, you don't need to pull the trigger. Pull back just enough to be able to release the slide levers, and yeah, making this look harder than it is. This is supposed to be a lot easier than that. Come on. There we go. And slide comes off. The frames are, there's a lot of difference in the frames. They both have the 3-slot pick rail. They both have some texture for the thumb rest or index finger rest on the other side, not a big deal. Very similar on the inside. They look a lot the same. How did that trigger take so long to develop when it's almost identical? In fact, as far as I'm looking at it, it's virtually identical to the one in the Arex Delta. Haven't got that figured out yet. But it's interesting that the frame is about 0.2 of an ounce heavier on the Rost Martin than it is on the Arex Delta. But let's take the slide from the Rost Martin and let's put it back on the Arex Delta. Take the slide from the Arex Delta and put it back on the Rost Martin. All right, enough of the Delta, because again, they're almost, one more thing, they're almost identical. Try to find the serial number down here. It is challenging on the Arex Delta and even more challenging on the Rost Martin. I had to actually light it up, take a picture with my phone to see the serial number on it. Okay, but anyway, the two guns are in a lot of ways the same, so I'm not sure how that long engineering. I've got to believe that Rost Martin just licensed the design from Arex Delta M to make the RM1c. Let's look at a couple others that are kind of comparable to it. Of course, the normal comparison is to a Glock 19. They are virtually the same length. Come on, drop them all over here. The same height, approximately the same width. The Glock is about 1/100 of an inch wider in the frame. Also, as it gets us into Glock talk here, the slide on the Glock is about 2/100 of an inch narrower and about 2/100 of an inch less tall than the slide on the Rost Martin, which makes holsters a little bit of an issue. Now, this particular one, for my Glock, I can get the Rost Martin in. It doesn't quite go down all the way. I think this is probably designed for a Glock 26, not a 19, but the same frame size. So it'll fit in that. I've got a blade tech that this won't fit in, mainly because the slide is just that couple 100ths of an inch wider, makes a difference. Of course, it does fit in a Glock 19 leather holster. This is a Galco. Carried this as an off-duty gun or off-duty holster for a long time, and it does fit in that Glock holster. So you may be able to fit it in a Glock holster, you may not be able to. Magazines do fit into a Glock magazine carrier, even though they are just a hair slimmer than the Glock 19 mag. Not a lot, just a hair. Polymer, metal, yeah, kind of like the metal mags. All right, other comparisons. Look closer to the price range, and we can compare this to the Palmetto State Armory Compact. And of course, this has got an optic and a threaded barrel on it, so when you put them on the scale, you'll see this might be just a hair heavier. In fact, let's do that. I didn't do that with the Arex Delta because I'm kind of comparing apples to kumquats here. Turn it on first. So the PSA 24.5 ounces at 16 rounds. We're at 31.3. Look at the Rost Martin and 21.1, 27.9. Swap that out for the Arex Delta, and again, it's got a threaded barrel on it. 28.4. Take away the threaded barrel, probably about the same. One other one that it can be compared to is actually one of my favorites, and that is the Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 compact. Now, granted, this one's got an optic on. That optic's going to add a couple ounces to it, but size-wise, we're going to be virtually identical. Height-wise in the back, again with the magazine in, we are virtually identical. Although again, the grip on the Smith & Wesson is a couple hundredths of an inch wider than it is on the Rost Martin. And as to weight, this is the heavy weight of the bunch. Again, it's got an optic on it, but we're 34.3 ounces. That's with 16 rounds in it. Okay, I mentioned before it does have a texture area for the secondary thumb, or if you're backhanded, it'd be your index finger, and certainly a good index point for your trigger finger if you're right-handed. Texture on it is, yeah, I'm not real excited about it. They call this the, let's see, what do they officially call it? They call this the responsive grip texture. I don't know how responsive it is. It actually kind of reminds me of the texture on the PSA Dagger. Not the pattern, but at least the feel of the texture itself. Not very aggressive. It actually feels maybe a little more aggressive on the back strap, not so much on the sides. And one of my common complaints about a firearm is the place where my hand really needs to, of course it needs to get the grip all over the place, but right up here, there is none. And when I got a good solid grip on it, there's an area of my hand that's just not hanging onto the gun for the friction. Right hand side is less important, but again, if you're left-handed, that becomes more important. But then again, that's not unusual. Glock, Gen 5, same kind of thing. Gen 4, same thing. My Smith & Wesson is notorious for leaving that area blank. However, the texture on the Smith & Wesson M.2.0 is M2.0, sorry, is much grippier. Really like the texture on the Smith & Wesson, much more so, even though it's kind of bare up there. Grips the hand a whole lot better. Even the texture on the Arex Delta M is more substantial, and it's got it in the right place where I can really feel it right under here, and a good friction control right there. So I'm a little disappointed in the lack of texture feel, as well as the lack of texture placement. They did put tiny little striations on the front of the trigger guard. If you happen to be Jerry or Lena Mikulik, yeah, and you shoot with one or two fingers on the front, okay, but for the rest of the world that has a hard time doing that without pulling the gun off target, not so much. High undercut, do like it. Also, this does, we're kind of jumping around here, this gets me back to the trigger, and the way I shoot almost every gun is pressure downward, scraping against the trigger guard. That kind of acts as a shock absorber, so my finger is as low as I can possibly get. And with a Glock, I get pinch as the trigger is releasing and resetting. I don't get it on the Rost Martin. So nice feeling trigger. I like it better than a Glock trigger, that's for sure. There's a lot to be said about it. Again, full ambient controls, and including the slide stop lever. Let's see how this will actually work using the slide stop on the right as a slide release. And it does work, something that Smith & Wesson does not do. Dovetail rear, dovetail front sights instead of the Glock posted front sight. Serrations on the top, front and rear grip serrations, which work well for press checks. I like all of that. serrated back plate. Again, cuts down glare theoretically. No real billboards on it. Rost Martin, Dallas, Texas, and Rost Martin RM1c on the right, 9x19 on the barrel. That's it. Good high grip position. I like a lot about it. So it's going to be real interesting when I get this out to the range, just to see how this compares with some of the other guns. In fact, I'll shoot it side by side with my recently acquired Arex Delta M, just to see how or what difference there is between the two. Price-wise, a lot of hope, but again, the Arex is going to be about the same. The PSA, sometimes you can find those for a really good discount. I bought mine with 10 PMags for a really ridiculous price, but it's going to be a whole lot less expensive than the Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 or the Glock 19. So is it going to run just as well? All the articles I've read so far show that hey, this thing is a good, reliable gun, supposedly a good, accurate gun. We're going to take it out and play initially with iron sights. We'll put an optic on it and see how that works, and we will get back with you. All right, that is a good comparison with the Rost Martin RM1c compact. That's first in the line. They may come out with a subcompact at some point, may even come out with a full size at some point. We'll see where Rost Martin goes. I hope that wish them the best. Again, good American-made company, and they got a lot invested in this. Let's hope this product line takes off. Thanks for stopping in.